Okay, what is this book about, Jeff? And the deal is, it's for directors and executives of brick and mortar companies. So this is for people that have been in the marketplace for some time, and all of a sudden their stock prices are starting to suffer because their markets are coming under attack from the dot-coms. The first time this actually was announced happening was about a year ago when the Wall Street Journal ran an article about Barnes & Noble and introduced the verb to be Amazoned. And the net of the article was, you don't want to get Amazoned. Well, this is for directors and executives of companies who are getting Amazoned. Living on the Fault Line presents a set of concepts and strategies. This is pretty classic Jeff Moore stuff, lots of conceptual models here, for achieving sustainable competitive advantage in the age of the internet. And that's fundamentally is what stock price is based on, sustainable competitive advantage. So that's what I'm trying to do. The thing that makes this thing a little bit different from anything I've written before is this book is directed as much toward people who have never been in high tech before as it is to those of us in this room, in that if the internet has entered their market, they are experiencing high tech market dynamics for the first time. And by and large, they're pretty darn confused. And so part of the intent of this work is to help people who have never seen these dynamics before. I have to say, however, sometimes that includes the directors and executives of Fortune 500 high-tech corporations who've been insulated from these dynamics for a long time and are now experiencing them in a painful way. So this is intended to help people deal with a series of dynamics that have come into the market that are new. The book sort of tackles it by sort of parsing the title and taking the title apart into various pieces. The age of the internet idea is that we are living in an economy, this new economy idea, where all these things are shifting back and forth from traditional staged sources of value to new sources of value. So instead of having your money in assets, it's got to be in information. And where products used to rule, now it's services that rule. And when large vertically integrated companies walked the earth, before the meteors or whatever, now it's nimble, mammalian, sort of virtually integrated companies. And where we used to play everything for money, and money was the ultimate judge of the competitive effort, now it's time. So time has become the new metric of the scarce resource and the precious resource that you have to manage. So a whole lot of things are changing. And what that's done is that it has changed the basis for shareholder value. And the markets have reacted. Now, you can take any kind of judgment you want on the stock market, but the intent of the book is to say the stock market is an information system. It is, at the end of every day, the collective decision-making of millions of investors is netted out to the best form of equilibrium that constituency could create with the information available. I would argue that the stock market in general is a more accurate reflection than any individual's analysis of the stock market. And so I think it's important that we be able to internalize what it's trying to tell us, even though we often get in denial about what it's trying to tell us. And that argument is based on the notion that stock price reflects competitive advantage. That what investors really want to invest in is a future stream of earnings, and they're looking for the companies that's best set up to create that future stream of earnings, and that's the company that has the strongest competitive advantage. And they bid up the companies that they think have the competitive advantage going forward, and they bid down the ones they think are losing in competitive advantage. Now, that process has been going on since the stock market opened. But what has really created a lot of confusion and anguish and bad feeling, I think, among a lot of both managers and directors and investors is with the rise of the technology-enabled markets, the stock market has begun behaving in ways that are absolutely unprecedented in its own history. And then with the rise of the internet, these chaotic effects just got another complete boost and sort of another shift up in terms of high octane. And what the book argues is that this is an artifact of the technology adoption life cycle. It's the sort of dynamics we talked about in the gorilla game. That the life cycle actually causes competitive advantage to shift dramatically, very, very rapidly, multiple times in the evolution of a technology in the emergent market phase. And until the technology finally settles down to what we call Main Street, the market is very unstable, and competitive advantage in one stage actually is competitive disadvantage at the next stage, so there's an enormous amount of volatility in the market. But I would argue that volatility reflects the volatility in the world around who is gaining advantage in the rolling out of the technology adoption life cycle. And that's what we call living on the fault line. The technology adoption life cycle is the fault line that's running under our markets. It's continually destabilizing all of our attempts to build sustainable competitive advantage. And the last chapter is a takeoff on Jim Collins and Jerry Porras' book called Build to Last. And building to last is what would it take, having done the triage and realizing I don't think I want to go through this again, how would I develop a culture that could respond to this continual earthquake kind of destabilization creatively and successfully going forward? And the basis of this chapter is that lasting competitive advantage is rooted in managing company culture. And so that got us to this topic of culture. And I have to say, I wasn't particularly happy about getting to this topic of culture. I am from California. You know, guys from California normally like to talk about touchy-feely stuff, but the truth is I'm an Oregonian. And in Oregon, we don't talk about culture. We don't talk about much of anything that isn't like just out in front of us. So it was a little tough. And the deal here is, and it's a deal I think that we all have, in so much as we're executives or managers in corporations, it's this two-edged sword with culture. It's too powerful to ignore, and it's too subjective to manage. And so you can't say, you know what, culture, blow it off. Okay? It doesn't matter. Because we know it does matter. But as soon as you admit to yourself or own up to the fact that it matters, you then say, and we have no tools to deal with it. Okay? Zero. So at that point, I got an insight. And the insight was, this is just like marketing. Okay? And I figured, you know what? I made 10 years of a living out of explaining marketing with models. I can do this again. This is my renewal. And so what I wanted to do in this chapter was to create some framework models that allow people to sort of dissect the dynamics of culture the way the technology adoption life cycle model tries to dissect the dynamics of a high-tech market, and to create a vocabulary where managers could speak in English sentences that, you know, had personal meaning and actually make conscious decisions about what kinds of cultures they were trying to create and what were the consequences of different cultural choices. So that's where this thing is headed. So the four cultures. The culture around self-actualization is called the cultivation culture.